Welcome back, DIVEBOMB IndyCar Podcast. And you see, we've got the cameras on this week because we've got a very special guest on the podcast, Sky Sports IndyCar commentator, Tom Gaymor. Tom, welcome.
Thank you very much. And my camera's working, and it's good to see and meet you all as well.
The man behind the mic, you finally all know what he looks like. So privileged to all our viewers.
This is not my commentary box, by the way. Everybody thinks I'm doing it from a broom cupboard. It's not. I am actually at Sky Sports F1. We do trial this new technology called the cloud, and that's why we do run into one or two technical issues every now and then. But it's been work in progress, and this year's been another step forward. And hopefully that continues next year as well.
Cool. So hopefully no technical issues today. I don't think the DIVEBOMB IndyCar Podcast has ever had any technical issues. So fingers crossed.
I might jinx it.
Let's hope not. Let's hope not. We'll see. The Sky Sports curse. But yeah, let's crack on with some discussions and some questions.
Yeah, so I think we want to start just speaking a bit about your career before we maybe move into some specific IndyCar discussion. I think first off, I'd just like to ask about your actual racing career before you moved into media. Can you maybe give the listeners a quick overview of the racing you did?
Yeah, it was so long ago, I can barely remember. No, I'm joking. 23 years ago, really, was when I was racing. I was really fortunate enough to sort of grow up karting, but I didn't have that sort of investment, that money that other families had, and off the back of that did very limited sort of national karting. Never actually drove a two-stroke kart, did four-stroke karting. And then I was very fortunate to have an opportunity to go and try out in Le Mans for Formula Renault Campus, which was funded by ELF, funded by Renault, fully funded first year in cars, living in Le Mans and racing all around France, all around Europe. And I was selected to be one of the two British drivers, together with a whole host of international drivers, French, Spanish, Chinese, Japanese, American, Canadian, Romanian. It was incredible. There were so many of us and we were so young. We just had the most wonderful adventure. And then I did a couple of years in France, came back to the UK, raced for a French manufacturer in Formula Ford, for Miguel. So the likes of Jenson Button and Anthony Davidson had raced for Hayward Racing in the years previous to me. We were racing in front of big crowds or on the touring car package. Then I got diagnosed off the back of an accident with something called a spondylolisthesis, which huge percentage of the population have. It's where the bony union, if you like, in your lumbar spine doesn't form properly. And because I'd had an accident, it had actually crumbled away like a biscuit. So I had a huge operation, longer than a full heart bypass, really, to build metal framework into my back. I had bone grafts from my pelvis to reconstruct around the bone. And there began a really long physical rehabilitation program. Took about 16 months. And off the back of that, I was sort of inadvertently, without realizing it, going through a mental health journey as well, just centered around the lack of control, the unknowns, not being able to focus on an outcome, losing my career, and all the rest of it. And it was a really difficult time. And it was sort of a time in my life that really shaped who I am today. And actually, they do say what doesn't break you makes you stronger. It really felt like it broke me, but it's made me much stronger in terms of not my resilience to be able to cope with things, but just having had that experience, I now have a better understanding of how to cope with things. And so had to get a proper job and swap the steering wheel for the microphone. No one teaches you how to do anything in TV. It's just sink or swim. Luckily, social media was sort of in the early advances, so I didn't get too much abuse and hatred. And I sort of found a way in the commentary world, and I was really lucky to get that opportunity. I look back at it and sort of, I'm really grateful to Simon Reed and Eurosport and all those that sort of believed in me in the early days, and here I am now, sort of 10, 12 years on.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's really interesting. When you realised that the racing career unfortunately wasn't going to work out, was it sort of an immediate thing that you thought you'd want to go into the broadcasting media side of things?
No. So I sort of used the analogy of splitting up with someone that you love, because I wasn't ready to leave. In terms of, I was desperate to get back into a car, and I felt so hard done by and so sort of emotionally charged around not being able to follow my dream and having that dream sort of snatched away from me. And that was that. It was very difficult to look at motorsport with the same passion and the same enthusiasm, because, you know, seeing all your friends doing what you can't do was just way too raw. It was like seeing someone run off with your best friend and you have to meet up with them every day. You know what I mean? It's really hard. So that's the best analogy I can use. And I actually went and got a job in London. I worked for Getty Images, who are a big sort of news and sort of photographic library. That was far too much like hard work. And after about 6 months, I came back to motorsport with my tail between my legs, and I realized all my friends were there, my passion was there, all my contacts were in that world, and I actually got back into instructing, being with race teams, doing the corporate stuff at Thruxton, at brands, at various different places up and down the country for various different manufacturers. Obviously I had the commentary stuff with the TV. It wasn't just the commentary, because I couldn't rely on that, so I did a whole host of different things, tried my hand at a bit of driver management as well. So sort of putting everything together and being a jack of all trades kept the bank manager happy, kept food and water on my table, and actually I was back in an environment that I know I love. It was just, as I say, off the back of 16 months rehabilitation, 6 months sulking, it was a pretty turbulent time.
Yeah, it's good that you still found a way in motorsports in some manner.
Yeah, thank you.
Obviously, there's like a lot that goes into the race week. Kind of, what are your preparations going into the weekend? Is there something that you do, or just what do you do going into that weekend?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I always say it's a bit like revising for an exam. And I left school at 16. I was absolutely hopeless at revising for exams. I was always the one that turned up underprepared and hoped for the best. But now it's my career, and I've got a passion for it. You have that sort of natural interest in terms of what you're doing to prepare. And then as you get a bit more experience, you know what you want to say and what it is that you want to have in front of you in terms of statistics and or information. It is like revising for an exam, because you cannot switch off, into a lead up to an event. So in that week, if you like, I mean, you're preparing for maybe a couple of weeks out, but in that sort of week, the days leading up to the event, it's really intense, because you're constantly talking to people. You have to be a sponge of information. So you've got that structure, that framework of the information and the stats and that kind of stuff. But you need to put the flesh on the bones, so to speak. You know, if you have a red flag, if you have a rain delay, whatever it is, you've got to have that information that's just constantly flowing around in your head. So you're just having just endless conversations with drivers, with teams, with journalists, just scouring. Social media is wonderful because people put things out there, and you know, there's lots of rumor mills that you've got to keep up with that are topical, that are worth discussing. So it's a really intense time, and you do a lot of preparation in the sort of week up to it. And then on a Sunday night, you're just like, I'm absolutely exhausted. Your brain, you've got smoke coming out your ears.
Yeah, it definitely seems like something you can't really prepare for, because it's like different kind of every weekend.
Yes, and it's organised chaos as well. So it's best laid plans never survive the first contact, and you can have it in your mind as you want to say it, but it all goes wrong. You know, we'll have a technical problem, I'll miss the break, or NBC will come back off a quick safety car going in, or a green restart, or whatever it is. And you know, you've got to really think on your feet and be really versatile. So you can't have it too structured. It's just got to be in your head.
Yeah, I feel like people really underestimate how much goes into being a commentator or a presenter, with all the planning, and just everything else that comes with it. But
yeah, exactly. I think you're right. And it's not just that, it's the distractions as well, because you've got people talking to you constantly. So, they'll be like 1 minute out in terms of coming back from the break. And then you've got that count from about 30 seconds down. You've got that constant open gallery in terms of the director as well. You've got screens, you've got your co-commentator, who I don't have for IndyCar, but I'll have for a lot of other events. You've got multiple different screens, you've got social media, you've got, it's just information overload. And it's so easy to miss something. That's why when you sit at home and a commentator doesn't say something and you're like, how have they not seen that? And it's because it's easy to miss things sometimes.
Yeah, so I think I'm right in saying you covered some other sports as well, but when the opportunity came about, what was it that really drew you to IndyCar? And you mentioned to us off camera as well that you've kind of followed the series in its other iterations. So yeah, what was it that made you want to get into the Sky gig with IndyCar?
You know what? I always say sport is entertainment, and I'm a mad rugby fan. I'm passionate about rugby, but 2 games ago, before England played in the last match, I actually turned it off against Japan, not because I didn't want to support England or whatever. It just wasn't entertaining, and it's a bit like a rubbish movie. You just get to the stage where you're like, gee, I just cannot stomach any more of this. On to the next thing, and sport's a bit like that, but you never get that in IndyCar. And we were talking about it before we came on. First and foremost, the Americans do entertainment so well. The sort of hyperbole, the razzmatazz, the ceremony and pomp before all the events and everything. It's just a wonderful way. And it is a bit like Marmite. Some people love it, some people hate it. I absolutely love it. And so that for me really gets me going. That's got me on the edge of my seat, the hair on the back of your neck standing out. You're ready to get into it, whether or not you're a fan or whatever it is that you're doing. IndyCar really sucks you in like that. And then the sport itself, you just never know who's going to win. It's so, people always tweet in and they say, right, what are your predictions? And I make a Horlicks of it every week, because it's just impossible to. We're
the same.
Yeah, some of Scott Dixon's drives at the end of the year, it's just impossible to predict what's going to happen, and that's the magic for me. Lots of overtaking. I think the circuits are quite raw. They lend themselves to mistakes. If you make a mistake, you get punished. You spin. You're on the grass. You're in the gravel. It's not just a tarmac runoff where you unload the wheel and away you go. And I think the push to pass is much better than DRS, so it's much more authentic in terms of the tactical element and the racing. So that's what lent me to IndyCar. I was always a big fan. I've been over to the States. I've watched them here. I actually did an event 20 odd years ago with Keith Ewan in the Sky Sports studio. So that was the first TV thing I ever did. And I was a studio guest with Lee McKenzie and Christopher Tate and Keith Ewan. It was wonderful. And I've sort of come full circle now through BT Sport and now Sky Sports.
So now that the IndyCar season has kind of come to the end, is there any projects that you're working on for either the rest of this year or for next year?
No, I'm going to hibernate. I'm so down in the dumps that there's no IndyCar. It's such a shame that it comes to an end so early. The main reason is NBC and the NFL deal, and it's very difficult. A lot of modern day sport relies on its television deals and networks and that kind of stuff. And NFL starting, that's one of the reasons it stops so early. It does start early though. Really good question. I've got a couple of things that I've been doing. I was commentating the other weekend on the Vol d'Or, so I do all the motorbike stuff, the Endurance World Championships, huge for the manufacturers, the Suzuka 8 Hour and that kind of stuff. I'm doing the World Endurance Race from Bahrain. I've got 1 or 2 other projects, and it's a chance for me to get into some of the voluntary work that I do as well. I do loads of sort of voluntary work away from motorsport that is really interesting, or I find it interesting. That's why I do it. And a lot of that is sort of helping other people. I'm hosting an event tomorrow. I'm doing a London Air Ambulance event in a week's time as well. I was at the police rehabilitation centre yesterday. So I'm just doing loads of really random stuff that will probably make no sense to anyone, but I find it really interesting.
Yeah, along with one of the other projects, I saw that you was an ambassador for, was it Divert London with the
Yes.
with the Met Police Custody Programme. Can you just talk to us a bit about that and kind of like how you got into that programme? Because it's completely different kind of from sports and from IndyCar.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So up until about 10 years ago, I knew very little about anything other than my world as a racing driver. And as somebody that was trying to sort of rebuild my own career, I was quite self-centered. And, you've got your interests and that kind of stuff. But, from a sort of sociological perspective, you don't really look into other people's worlds or spend too much time outside of your world. And I was invited out by the local borough commander. I knew nothing about policing, bar being pulled over for speeding once or twice. And it just transformed my world in the sense that I was forever talking about what I'd seen and experienced that night. And what I did see and experience was very different to what we are exposed to through the mainstream media, and also what we're sort of led to believe through social narratives and sort of our own personal experience. And one of the moments that really touched me was a young 16-year-old kid who had been arrested and knocked off his moped for suspected possession of Class A drugs and various other things. And it quickly transpired that this young kid was full of life. He had so much love and energy behind his eyes. And actually, was he a victim or was he a criminal, in the sense that a lot of the young kids now, I've realized and learned through years of working in this field, are actually trafficked and exploited into criminality from care homes and various different communities and environments. Sort of over 30% of young kids in London are growing up in poverty, can't eat three meals, and they get exploited into making bad decisions. And this young kid was very much that, and he was a million miles away from home. His parents didn't want to know. He was 16 years of age, and I just thought, I want to help him. I came home and I was just thinking about it. I couldn't help him, but there was this program that I was introduced to called Divert, which is working with young kids in and around the criminal justice system and or on the fringes. And that was really the catalyst for how I got involved in Divert. And I'm actually seeing the chap who's created Divert tomorrow. I've known him for about 8 years now, and he's doing some wonderful work in that field. And it's really rewarding. There's so many good kids that don't have the hope and opportunity that I grew up with, and I think it's not about giving these kids this sort of golden ticket. It's about getting everyone on the same start line. It's about if we can all be on the same start line in life, and we can all grow up with that hope and opportunity to follow whatever it is that interests us, whether or not sport, music, acting, whatever it is, then the world will be a better place.
Yeah, I think that's just really cool as well, because I have some family that work in the police, and sometimes they see things and it's stuff that they can't help with because it's their job to kind of stop it, and stuff that like they want to do but they can't. And it's really nice to see that there's programs out there that can kind of help them and can kind of help all like the untold stories as well and the reasons they've gone into it.
Yeah, definitely. And my wife's a police officer, so she sort of works on that side, and I think policing's having that discussion. How much into the sort of prevention do we go? Are we just guardians for the criminal justice system, or do we help on the prevention strand as well? I think they can do both.
Yeah, kudos to you for all of that. I think it's fascinating to gain that insight aside from, what we see on TV or hear on TV. It's good for people to get to know the other stuff, the other parts of your life.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I'm passionate about it, as you can tell. So.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's talk about hopefully your other passion, which is IndyCar. As we always kind of do on the podcast, a bit of a weekly news roundup, but obviously there was a lot to discuss this week. Calendar came out on Monday, unfortunately, literally hours after we recorded last week's episode. Major changes. Milwaukee Miles going to be coming back as a double header, but that means Texas is gone as well as the Indy GP. First, we need to get a reaction to everything. I think Texas is the one we're going to be most disappointed about. We all unanimously agree Texas was our favourite race of the year for this season, and fortunately, NASCAR meant there's no space for it this year.
Yeah, I think it's a really complex, and we touched on this earlier on around NBC and the television networks with the sort of Olympics squeezing into the middle of the year. NASCAR have had to make changes to their calendar and various other things to tie up with NBC, and Texas, that slot has been taken up with NASCAR. And, you know, the harsh reality of it is NASCAR are going to put more bums on seats when they go to Texas. You know, for us, it's been a wonderful race. The last couple of years have been great, especially now they've got the second groove going and they got rid of that horrible stuff that they put on the track to help NASCAR get the second groove going. But we've been gazumped. And I know Roger Penske's really cheesed off because he wanted a super speedway sort of warm up, if you like, before the 500, because, you know, there's a lot of rookies in that field that now go to the 500. And okay, there's a lot of running in the month of May, but they're not going to get that pack running and that sort of experience from Texas. We're not going to get that wonderful racing. Joseph Newgarden's obviously going to be bummed because he's just Mr. Texas. And, you know, Penske will be as well. But never say never, because although it's the first, I think it's 97 or something like that, since it's not been on the calendar, you know, I could see that coming back very quickly once they sort of work out the commercials. Everyone had the appetite to make it work. It's just the jigsaw piece didn't fit into the puzzle for 24. But there are some really exciting additions. Obviously, we all know about Nashville being at the end, and that could just be bedlam and organized chaos for the championship decider. And then it's great to see a new track on the circuit as well. You know, whatever the championship, whenever you reach or visit new venues, that's awesome. So Milwaukee coming back, first time in sort of 9 years, something like that's been on the calendar. And 2 night races. I mean, IndyCar under the lights, I think we've missed that. It's slightly rubbish for us over here in the UK because it means that we're going to have to stay out really late and just be exhausted for work the next day and or not watch it live. But IndyCar under the lights, I think, is spectacular whenever you see it, and also the titanium skids, all the sparks flying up, that kind of stuff. It's just, you know, for me, those sort of bowl ovals, the smaller ovals, they're better under the lights.
Yeah, I think both races are actually Saturday next year, so it might not be too bad, the 2 night races. So we'll see how that one unfolds.
I'll see you there.
I'll see you at the 3-4 a.m. start time. Obviously, we were talking about Texas. We were at a press conference last week discussing all this. Texas wanted it to happen, IndyCar wanted it to happen, and I think the general consensus is we'll see it back in 2025, and I think that's good for every single party because, as we said, Texas was absolutely thrilling this year. It was sort of the return of pack racing as such. It wasn't quite to the same degree, but it was the closest we've seen in many years, and getting rid of that PJ1 was an absolute saviour for Texas. So and then Nashville is going to be a fun one as well. Obviously, adjusting the layout. I don't know if you've ever noticed it, the pit lanes of really bizarre shape. So
I think there's more corners in pit lane than there are actually out on the track.
Yeah, I think there's 7 or something.
It's got that sort of Detroit feel to it, hasn't it? Now we're downtown Detroit, but it's going to be downtown Nashville. Yeah. So, you know, that, although it's the last venue, is going to be kind of new backdrop and that kind of thing. So that's going to be good. Laguna in the summer is going to be pretty toasty for a lot of the drivers. I was speaking to the IndyCar sort of engineering team, and they've got a sort of new lightweight aero screen for next year that's been tested alongside the hybrid engines. So when they've been doing the hybrid testing, they've been testing that new aero screen, which is going to bring a really different dynamic to the car. It's obviously going to completely change the center of pressure, the weight, that kind of stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see how the teams react to that. But it's also got much more efficient cooling, because cooling continues to be a really big issue. They don't make an issue of it too much on the broadcast and the drivers, but take it from me, there are certain drivers that are really struggling. I mean, literally on the edge of what is humanly possible in terms of cooking in the car. So, you know, they're right up around 40 centigrade core body temperature, which, you know, if you had a temperature like that, you'd probably ring 101 or whatever the number is, and, you know, seek some medical advice.
Yeah, for sure. I think in terms of my take on the calendar, it's just disappointing. I think there was clamour for more than 2 super speedways as we had, and I think to end up with one is just, it's a little bit disappointing. I think especially as Texas was making this return to prominence, where obviously, as we said, last year's race was fantastic. At least we get the doubleheader at Milwaukee instead, and I guess that's some sort of consolation. You do end up with one more oval race on the calendar than we had last year, at least.
And I think the big challenge is not necessarily the appetite or the vision, it's the commercials. You know, we're in a difficult economy at the moment, and Hy-Vee plumb a huge amount as the promoter into, say, Iowa, and you've got to get that sort of similar sort of buy-in. Penske are their own promoter for some of the venues, and you have to find that money from somewhere. And, you know, where some of the speedways are, a lot of it's NASCAR country and or not fit for IndyCar. So they'd have to make huge changes. You know, Milwaukee are having to make huge changes to make it work. So it's about getting the commercials right. And, you know, we want to see more races outside of the US. You know, you've got Toronto, but it'd be great to sort of go Central, South America. Europe would be a dream as well. As I said earlier on, I saw races at Rockingham and Brands, IndyCar and Champ Car era. But it's about getting those commercials right. Yeah, it's a difficult world out there. And IndyCar, you know, Roger Penske's pushing a lot of money into marketing now, record budgets in terms of marketing. The sport's growing, it's on the crest of a wave. But it's important not to get too greedy, because if it suddenly becomes insolvent, the budgets become too big, the teams will drop out, they will go, you know, then you're in a difficult place. So I think they're doing it properly. You know, if you looked at it as a football club, it's a really good, it's like a Brentford business model, you know what I mean? They haven't gone down the sort of Man City style, you know, get a rich owner and write off the insolvency. You know, they're doing it diligently, and we've just got to be patient. But it's frustrating because you want it all in one go, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. I think, as you mentioned, I think having 2 night races is good. I remember really enjoying Gateway when it was delayed a bit, I think because of weather in 22. It was about 4 a.m. by the time I was in bed, but, you know, it was fun. It was fun. But I think another kind of negative with Texas going away is just there's a massive gap between the first 2 points paying races. I think it's 42 days, maybe. I know we have the $1 million challenge at Thermal between that, but it's a big gap between the first couple of actual meaningful competitive races. When you've waited so long for the season to get underway, you kind of just want it to get properly underway, and then to have that sort of hiatus it's a bit disappointing. So I think I would just say there's positives about the calendar, but there's definitely negatives with what we've seen.
Yeah, and I think when you do a calendar nowadays, there are just so many factors you've got to take in. You've got to take TV, you've got to take in NASCAR, you've got to take in the circuit scheduling, you've got to sort out the window, you know, the weather window as well for some places, and it just creates a sort of impossible outcome where you've got to mold together this calendar, which can be quite difficult to do. And as they said in the press conferences, it's not an easy task, especially with the Olympics this year, which creates another 3-week gap where you've got no racing. So it is a very difficult task of making a calendar, and although we're disappointed, there's no easy solution to sorting this out.
Juncos and sort of Augustine Canapino and you know, that whole operation has grown this massive audience in Argentina, hasn't it? And it'll be interesting to see if Canapino's got the commercials to come back in 2024. But a race there would be fantastic. Yeah,
I think obviously it's going to be non-points paying next year, and there was a bit of a quote from Andretti and Bobby Ray who will say they did really want it to be a points paying race. I think maybe try it out for 2024, see what it's like for the future, and hopefully if Argentina is successful, we can look at more international races. And it's clearly a big market, even in the States. We're seeing the wild love for Canapino. So I think also very dependent on if he comes back next year. But it's got to be said.
He's done a really good job.
Yeah, no, we've touched on this quite a lot actually about Canapino. Where
many times.
we expected him to be miles off the pace, and he's ended up being well, maybe up there as impressive as Armstrong has been, considering the circumstances. We always say, he's a rookie, didn't speak English, he's never driven a single seater, and he almost got podium in Laguna Seca, so he's
it's really similar to sort of Scott McLaughlin's story. And historically speaking, people with a roof over their head don't go back down the single seater avenue. It just doesn't happen. And to see those two doing it and being so successful in IndyCar just shows how risk adverse some of the other series are. And it can be done, but it's really hard, and you've got to be super talented.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I love personally about IndyCar is sort of the diversity you get. You get the ex-F1 drivers like Grosjean or Ericsson, the F2 crop you're getting now, Eilert, Yuri Vips, Lundgaard, Armstrong. Then you've got the randoms, Canapino, McLaughlin, and you've got Pelot. He was racing in Japan before. Then you've got the Indy next guys, Kirkwood, Malukas. It's all over the place. Jimmy Johnson, for example, was another one when he was racing just a year ago from NASCAR. And I think that's
they love the underdogs in America, and they're not scared to take a chance. If the kid's good enough, or whoever it is, they'll stick him in, and they'll take that chance. They'll find a way. Whereas I find in some of the other championships, no names, they will be quite risk adverse and find an excuse as to why someone can't do something, when essentially, actually, if you invest in them and give them the time and the space they need, they will deliver.
Yeah, and it's like we touched on a bit RLL with Yuri Vips. Harvey was obviously dropped, and they needed to get into that leader circle, and they're chucking a rookie to do so. And that's sort of like the trust and risk that IndyCar teams are willing to take when they've got that belief in someone.
Look at Kirkwood. Kirkwood's another, he's going to be good. He's like a little new garden. He definitely is.
We're talking to Kirkwood. It's a good time to bring up the news from his week, where he signed another multi-year deal with Andretti. So looking at least 25, 26 there. There were sniffles that Penske might want him when Will Power retires, but he's going to stay there. We all thought Kirkwood had a mighty impressive year, so I think we're all happy to see him stay.
Yeah, that was definitely Andretti flexing their muscles, because Penske were sniffing around, and there was no way that they, with their sort of growth into Andretti Global, their sort of ambitions with Formula One, they're trying to grow again, Andretti. There's no way they were going to let someone like Carl Kirkwood slip away.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one thing I would say is, like, that was Colton Herta's team, but Kirkwood has come in and he's really unsettled things in that regard. I feel like,
and stolen Brian.
Yep, and stolen Brian. But Herta was the guy. Yeah. This year that dynamic seems to have changed a bit. Herta didn't win a race. I think he picked up one podium. You've got Kirkwood winning a couple of races in his first season with the team. So he's a serious talent, and Andretti have done a good job to keep hold.
You know what? I first worked with Colton when he was over here doing F4 MSA Formula, when he was teammates with Lando, and he was sensationally fast. There was days during testing and that season where Lando couldn't live with him, just could not live with him. But he was sporadic. He was either in the wall, or around the pole or on pole. And he sort of carried that on. Yeah, he's carried that on into IndyCar. Then he sort of, there was that strange start to the season this year when they made a hash of things at the beginning, and then Brian was taken away. And you really saw the human element of Colton there. He's not bulletproof. He's a human being. He genuinely had that dip in form. That dip in form was not because he forgot how to drive. That will have been because he wasn't happy. And that's not him being angry or petulant. That's genuinely a crisis in confidence. And we all go through that. We're all human beings. And he was experiencing that. And you're doing it in front of lots of people as well. It's unpleasant. He didn't enjoy it. He showed a lot of character to bounce back from that. And it was a shame that he didn't get the rewards for some of his, good good Saturdays, if you like.
Yeah, I think Andretti really do have big intentions now. You've got Kirkwood on multi-year. You've got Herta till 27 or something. It's a long-term deal. And then you've got Ericsson in there too. Whether they go to a fourth car, we've kind of suggested maybe they drop down to 3, which is looking like the case, and then have a more focused team around them. It's Honda. I think Ganassi as well, getting Simpson in, has lost some engine for them as well.
I don't think Ganassi, that deal... Yes, Ganassi has signed Simpson, but I think, Honda will have maybe been given the green light from Andretti. I don't think Andretti are going to 4 cars, so there would have been sort of a polite conversation there. So I think the fact that Chip's gone to 5, I don't see Andretti. Could be wrong. It's not impossible, but it'd have to be a huge financial infrastructure to make that work for Honda.
Yeah, Honda at the limit of 15, I think, and then they've got to negotiate if they want one more. So we'll see how that one pans out. But it's looking pretty unlikely. But yeah, looking at long term, that I think could be quite beneficial. There was plenty of inconsistencies in Andretti last year. You'd have 2 cars on the pace, 2 cars off the pace, and you'd have...
They've been poor. Yeah. Ever since the aero screen came in, they can't seem to get their head around the ovals. When they've had chances to convert, they seem to make a horlicks of it, whether or not that's the from drivers. And they've just been poor. At the end of the day, it's been Chip Ganassi, Team Penske, and Arrow McLaren are very much there. And you've got other teams that are more than capable on their day. And Andretti, it's been pretty barren for them. For a team with that heritage, that expertise, the Andretti brand, and the heritage, it's not been great, and that'll be by their own admittance, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I think we touched on Ericsson's going to really help them. Whilst Grosjean sometimes is very quick, I think it's got to be said, he was erratic. He's had multiple moments of just throwing away points unnecessarily. Whilst maybe Ericsson doesn't quite have the raw speed, but he brings in the results. He gets the consistency, which I think Andretti really needs. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he didn't... Well, we joked about this. Only person he seemed to collide with was his fellow countryman. But everywhere else, he kept on the road, which Grosjean struggled with at times, let's say.
You know what? Grosjean was back neck training yesterday, and it was a very deliberate story that he put on his Instagram. I don't know if anyone saw that.
Do you see the Twitter comment he did?
No.
So someone quote tweeted the calendar, so I really hope to see tagged Romain Grosjean there, and then he commented with about 3 eye emojis. So maybe it's a...
There was a very deliberate Insta story. His neck train. You don't neck train for a WEC car. Just don't. So it's just really deliberate. I might be reading too much into that, but
I don't reckon you are, to be honest. I think it. Yeah, he's teasing a lot of things from the Twitter reply to that. Yeah, I think he could be returning.
Do you think a coin link up again?
You know, I'd love to see him in IndyCar. I think he's moved the family to the States. He loves flying. He's just done his commercial twin engine, hasn't he? He's always on the simulator. He loves it out there. He gets paid good money. He's enjoying it. Romain Grosjean is a real racer. When he got kicked out of Formula One after that sort of first tenure with Renault, he went back and did like Auto GP, which was like the defunct Euro 3000. He was racing with 7 other cars at best, and you didn't know 4 of them. You know what I mean? And he come from Formula One. He's not scared of it. He loves racing. He loves driving cars, and he enjoys IndyCar for that very reason. And I think actually he might be back happier in that sort of giant killing mold, because you can do that in IndyCar. It's the Meyer Shank, the sort of Castroneves, Simon Pagenaud model, where actually if you get a good strategy together, if you've got a good oval car, you can get some really big results in IndyCar. And I think he's going to be happier in that space.
You don't have the pressure you do at Andretti to perform and get those performances. And I think that's where he really thrived at Coyne in his first year. There's no expectations on the table. He had come back from this monster crash in Formula One, and people just wanted to see him enjoy his time. We saw him get multiple podiums. I think the Laguna Seca was the favourite one, where he was just dive-bombing everyone to the corkscrew.
And I think he needs to be the team leader as well. I don't think he needs any young kids going quicker than him and experienced Americans like Rossi winding him up and stuff like that. He doesn't need any of that. So,
yeah. I mean, we touched on his quite interesting rivalry with Scott McLaughlin at times this year. I think Detroit was where it kind of highlighted, but they just hit each other unnecessarily. So
yeah. Well, Scott's never going to back down.
No,
literally. He's never going to back down. That's what I love the way he goes racing. I think he's class in the car, and I think his box office out of it as well. I love his bus bros. I love his social media, his bromance with Joseph. But the way he responds to people on social media is quite funny as well.
It's brilliant.
Yeah, we do say this quite a lot. How we love how sort of non-PR trained IndyCar drivers can be at times. You've got people like David Malukas just makes memes in his spare time, so he's hilarious. You've got Pato Award is doing some rubbish off the track, and then
Pato's just Pato.
Yeah,
literally.
Great.
We were doing stuff this year with Arrow McLaren, and you turn up with Felix, and he's got his McLaren thing on, and he's all prepped. He's there 5 minutes before. He's super professional. And then you turn up with Pato, and he's lying back on his sofa. He's got a bowl full of strawberries and cream. He's not even in his McLaren stuff, and he's doing that impression of his car. He's like, and he's just absolute joy to talk to. I mean, Felix, they all are, but like you say, they all do it their own way, and I think that's the magic of IndyCar.
And then you've got the other flip side of the equation, like I said, like Will Power, who will just speak his mind whenever he feels like it.
The best was Road America.
We just loved that interview because it started off with him having a go at the track, and when he had enough of the track, it was time to move on to Grosjean. It just got better as it went.
The owner of the track parked outside his
It's great. Only in IndyCar as well. I mean, we also had, I think it was Gateway when Scott McLaughlin spun in, I think it was in practice, and then Power had the crash with Ericsson.
Yeah,
and Power was, I don't know if he didn't realize it was McLaughlin, but he was saying some idiot spun on the apron. Not realizing it was a teammate.
What's funny is we had Will 2.0 for the championship year, and everyone was like, "Where's Will Power? What have you done with Will Power?" And he was just genuinely faultless. And then this year, as it started to unravel, the old Will Power came back. Sort of Will Power 2.0 sort of short circuited and sort of ground to a halt.
We love these characters in the field. I think one of the points that we did really want to talk about is obviously we're all British based, and IndyCar is, as we hate to say it, predominantly American based. And I feel IndyCar is growing internationally. I think in the UK as well, it's starting to reflect a bit more. You're getting more fans around. Obviously, you've got the sort of numbers on this, but how, do you think IndyCar's doing a good job with this sort of stuff? Do you think it's reaching the foreign audience?
Year on year, it's growing on Sky Sports. We're super happy with the numbers we've seen. The Indy 500 had the last day of the golf match the Indy 500 in terms of viewers, and golf is a really big sport for Sky. So we're really pleased. IndyCar are also really pleased with the diversity within those numbers. So we're growing a really diverse audience over here. And, for me, it's wonderful to have everyone in that one fan base and the sort of Sky IndyCar hashtag on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. And that sort of community coming together every weekend that a race is on and just sharing in the fun and the enjoyment, I think makes it really, really special. And it's really inclusive as well. If people have got questions, other people will answer it. There's no or little abuse and hatred. I get some, but the majority of people don't. And, that's quite rare nowadays. And I think that is testament to you, to everyone that tunes in. It's a really, it's a really good community. It's enjoyable. It's a niche group as well. So, long may that continue.
Yeah, I think what's also particularly noticeable is if you draw the comparisons to Formula One, where the motorsport viewer base is, there there's issues of dominance and predictability, whilst IndyCar just provides absolutely opposite. I think when we predicted Newgarden winning at Iowa, that was sort of we knew how obvious it would be towards the weekend. I think that's the only ever time we've had anything like that. Whilst F1's going to be Verstappen's going to have a walk in the park, but this season, even with Pelot's dominance, you still couldn't predict it race on race. I think that's what makes it so special compared to other series.
Yeah, I think because in IndyCar, qualifying's not that important. If you look at Scott Dixon's record for success in championship and wins, and then actually you look at when he last had a pole and what he does on the Saturday, you realise that qualifying is not that important. So when you've got Pelot and others sort of coming through and winning, they're not always doing it from pole position or whatever it is, or from a dominant standpoint on Saturday. So you've still got that jeopardy, if you like. And then very quickly after the first cyclist stops, you can see people like Pelot on the move. And I always say, Pelot doing Pelot things or whatever it is, Dixie with his Dixie dust. But you can start to see how things, shape up. But he hasn't had it all his own way. But there was that really dominant stretch. And if you speak to people within IndyCar, people that know, that see the data, people like Dario Franchitti, whatever it is, that there was a lot of people saying a lot of very complimentary things about Alex Pelot.
Yeah, and I think IndyCar are really trying to push their product now. I think there was definitely more impetus put on social media this year, posting TikTok stuff or Instagram content, and then you look at the willingness to do this race in Argentina. In the press conference the other day, Mark Miles was saying that there's interest from Argentina, so there's other countries wanting to embrace IndyCar, and IndyCar as a series really want it to happen. There's some stumbling blocks with the financial situation in Argentina that could be potentially preventative of a race there happening, but it's definitely clear that IndyCar are trying to push their product.
And things happen quickly in IndyCar. There's less red tape and bureaucracy, unknowns, ideas come out, things happen quickly, decisions on race weekends, or, just random things like Will Power just saying, right, we need to get out there and run an extra practice session at Texas and get a second lane going, stuff like that. I think it's really free and free flowing. And I think that makes the championship all the better as well.
Yeah, I'm just desperate for more people to see what we have in IndyCar, the racing product, all of the characters in the series. 100 Days to Indy was part of, trying to push that. I think they actually said in the press conference as well that they are trying to get a partner over here so they can show it over here at last, because obviously we've not really been able to see it. It's been US based, and you're going to limit your growth if you're only, showing it in the US. But yeah, if we can get that in the UK, that would be good.
The challenge is getting people to pay for it. Where
that's the other thing.
Netflix pay for Drive to Survive, that kind of stuff. The challenge is here is getting a broadcaster to pay.
For sure, but it's necessary to show it internationally, because look what happened with Drive to Survive. It very quickly gained a lot of traction, and who's to say 100 Days to Indy, or if they do a second series, or even try and follow an entire season, which would probably be more preferable. They could go places because they have the product there. It's just about people seeing it, I would say.
And also, the freedom that drivers have within their own social media, and look at Bus Bros, you look at Armstrong and what he does, and Heach and Rossi, they're always really dry and funny, and that side of things actually Formula One doesn't have, and that's definitely driving eyeballs and growing audiences.
Yeah, I think as fans we definitely have a lot more access. I feel like we have a lot more access. I mean, like last week, Scott McLaughlin just went on a spree of quote tweeting people and having debates about, I don't know, I think it was Daniel Ricciardo, Liam Lawson, all F1 stuff. But he's happy to delve into, engaging with fans, and I think that's great because you wouldn't see that in F1.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. His spat with Malukas was quite funny.
Yeah, that was amusing. I didn't really, it was a bit strange. It felt like a lot made out of not very much. And I still don't know how legitimate the whole thing is, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to Little Dave becoming Big Dave.
Yeah, next year it'll happen. But let's have a look at next year, actually. It's an exciting season. I think That's through some names that they were really looking forward to. And I think for me, Linus Lundqvist is going to be one who I'm really excited to see. You know, he came into Meyershank and he was right on the pace from day one, and he was well ahead of Cashin Evans. And to see what he can do in the Ganassi, you know, he's coming in with knowledge of these tracks, doing the full program. Someone like Armstrong, who impressed this year. You know, Lundqvist has got that added experience and some plenty of tests. He's got all this stuff to back him.
The measure with Linus is how we measure potential and where he is on that scale. So some drivers have the ability to go very quickly, very early, and then the final 10th or 2 can take a bit of time. I think he's somebody that is resilient to the cause and actually won't be too, let's say, tough on himself when the likes of Palou are doing Palou things and various other things. I think he will give himself the time that he needs in order to find those final few tenths. He's definitely off on the right foot, but it's going to be a difficult time for him, I think, and a lesser individual in terms of that resilience. That's why I talked about the resilience, might find that pressure quite tough. I'm keen to see how Marcus deals with that pressure as well, because, you know, that's a full-time drive. There's no, you know, he's done his learning now. It's either deliver or don't. And when you're up against Palou and Dixon, that's much easier said than done. So, you know, and we're all human beings. And actually, when you're trying to get it done and it doesn't quite happen for various different reasons, there's 1,000,001 reasons why it doesn't happen in IndyCar. Look at Colton Herta. You know, it can be really hard to be resilient to the cause. So it'll be interesting to see who sort of wins that battle, Linus or Marcus.
Yeah, I think for me, it's a couple of Kiwis that I'll be keeping an eye on as well. Obviously, with Armstrong, it'll be really fascinating to see how he fares on ovals. I think clearly he's been really desperate to get onto ovals. He had his test at Texas, which by all accounts he seemed to enjoy. But then Scott McLaughlin as well. I mean, I think the expectations were slightly too high coming into this season. I personally said, probably a bit ambitiously as a McLaughlin fan, that he could be contending for the championship, but, you know, Ganassi were just such a force to be reckoned with. But I feel like he's coming off some brilliant momentum at the end of 2023. Like, I think top 9 finishes in every race since the 500. His last 8 qualifying runs, I think he was inside the top 2 in 7 of them. So some really positive momentum.
He makes some really good points. So I just touched on, you know, how difficult it is for it all to click in IndyCar. I used Colton Herta as an example. Scotty Max, another example. You know, Honda were slightly better on their mileage. That definitely helped Honda. Penske weren't quite at it in qualifying on some of the road and street courses. Then he had Joseph Newgarden having the season of his life on the ovals. You know, just really fine margins that actually prevented him from being able to really capitalize. And that's hard, you know, because it's win or bust for him. I think, where was it where he was just really disappointed with? I can't remember where it was. But it's win or bust. You know, he puts so much pressure on himself, and he's just not happy unless he wins. And that actually can be quite draining at times.
Yeah, I mean, it was massively impressive for McLaughlin to be the lead Penske, the lead Chevy car, the closest contender to the 2, obviously top 2 in the championship, both Ganassi cars. So he could be the one to bring the fight. I think a watchword we always look for in IndyCar is consistency, and McLaughlin had maybe struggled for consistency, made a few errors. I think, especially in 2022, he won 3 races, but he made mistakes and then had a bit of a lull that he struggled to bounce back from. But I think really since the Indy 500 this year, he's built a lot of consistency, and that's what you're looking for. That's how you win championships. You look at Dixon, I think his worst finish this year was 7th, aside from obviously the debacle at Long Beach. Palou didn't finish below 8th, I don't think. So consistency wins you championships.
Look at Pato. You know, that's where he was lacking.
Yeah, exactly. And then as the season went on, he also was another that started to develop some consistency. Yeah. So it did look like he had a mindset shift, and that's another thing that'll be interesting to see whether that continues and you don't have those few errant weekends next year for Pato.
Ninja hands.
Yes.
I think McLaren are going to be ones to really look out for next year, because I think Pato had a quietly year improved. Stuff like he really struggled with before, like tyre management was one in particular he really struggled with previously. That was a lot better this year. And if you take away those errant weekends, let's say he finished top 3 at the 500, he finished top 5 at Detroit, for example, he's much more in the picture. And I feel we said he had this mindset shift, and he had a lot more consistency towards the back end of the year. And McLaren have got a good overall package. I don't think it's as strong as Penske for sure, but it's up there. And then you've got Malukas coming in, who's a really exciting prospect. We've seen what he can do on the ovals as well, and he's proved himself for the road courses. And obviously Rossi's an old safe pair of hands. And the second year they've got a 3, they don't kind of have this learning year anymore they did this year, and they can really start pushing.
And they've got the big engineering truck coming over, so
Yes.
they've got that sort of F1 style engineering truck. So they're going to put a lot of weight behind it. They're growing. They're moving into obviously the Andretti premises. They're a team that, and Zach is very good at bringing in the resources, the sponsors, and building the commercials. So they've got a sort of fabulous platform there. Gavin Ward is really highly thought of as well, and so is Brian Barnard. I think they've got the complete package in Rossi. Rossi can do what Dixon does. Maybe not quite what Dixon does, but he's that complete IndyCar package. Their bullet is Pato. He is as quick as any other driver on that IndyCar grid, and give him the car and he's always going to be there and thereabouts. He's developing his trade as well. He's had that sort of pressure. He wants to be the golden boy at McLaren, then the Pelot deal and this and that sort of, he is emotive, but that's what we love about Pato, is if he's happy, he'll wear it on his sleeve. If he's upset, he'll wear it on his sleeve. You know what you're getting with Pato, and he wears his emotions on his sleeve. I think he'll be in a much calmer space next year. And then Malukas is the unknown. Not many people had Malukas down as the third driver at McLaren. I think he's going to surprise a lot of people. I think he brings like this sort of unassuming calmness to the table. He's a breath of fresh air, isn't he? He's almost like he's not meant to be there. He's like someone on a red letter day who's just enjoying it out, but he's super fast. And I think it'll be interesting to see how he fits into such a big organization, such as Andretti, such as McLaren, with all the pressures of the sort of PR responsibilities, and having to keep up with some of the others and that kind of stuff, and the sort of fun and games that go on in bigger teams, as we've seen. It's not for everyone. You see it across the board. There's a lot of interplay between the teammates. They're all there to beat each other, but work together doing it. So lots of question marks for little Dave, but I'm excited to see him on his journey. Yeah,
and I think the whole Pelot situation is an interesting one. I think maybe that did play a part on Pato ever so slightly, and maybe for now the pressure's off for him. He hasn't got the expectation. He's got to perform when Pelot comes in, and I think, as you said, Malukas is going to bring a breath of fresh air. He's very, very quick, as we've seen at times, and he's just a very likable guy, which I think is very important.
He's so likable, isn't he?
Yeah,
it's
the same as Pato for most people. They're just likable guys, and I think McLaren, not only because of their F1 operations, but because of how great their IndyCar team is, will get a lot of backing, which is very important.
Yeah.
I think as well the social media backing as well, like how they kind of do the social media.
It's funny.
Yeah, it will bring loads of people in. I think they've kind of are one of the best teams, I think, for the social media bit, and I think as long as they continue doing that, I think they could get the backing from other people and from lots of fans as well, because a lot of what to bring people in is through social media, and for them to be doing that so well, it will really work out for them.
Yeah, I'm glad you've seen that, because I think they're ace as well. I nearly mentioned them earlier when we were talking about social media, and I think Malukas and Pato will be at each other, and Rossi's kind of got that really dry sense of humour. Like he's like the awkward dad, like what's going on kind of thing. So it's going to be really funny watching him in their sort of videos when they put the three of them together.
Yeah, Rossi will pretend to hate it all, won't he? And maybe he'll quietly enjoy it.
Yeah. There was a funny video going around last year, 100 Days to Indy, where I think they were all in a boat and Kanan and Pato are pushing each other in as they do, and there's Rossi just sat on the side watching it all happen with sort of disappointed face.
Yeah, he's a really good guy. I've known Rossi for a long time. He actually lived just round the corner from me here, and slept on my floor the day before he flew to America for his first IndyCar test at Phoenix. And he genuinely was like, wish me luck. I'm going to need it. Rossi's a wicked character though. And when you get to know him, he's a lot less introverted than he is. But he's learning to be more confident with being introverted. He's really open and honest about it. He's super intelligent, like so mind-bogglingly intelligent, really analytical. That's why he likes to fly, because you can add up numbers and everything. And he's a really complex guy. I've got a lot of time for him.
Yeah, no, I mean, Off Track is a great listen as a podcast as well, and you really see, Alex Rossi, James Hinchcliffe, their characters, and then I think Connor Daly's got a podcast as well. He's another one that we really like on the podcast, just simply because he loves IndyCar, and he's another one that was a real shame that he unfortunately lost his seat last year, because he's arguably the most passionate in terms of any IndyCar driver.
Yeah, we need Connor Daly back, because he's a wonderful advocate and ambassador for IndyCar. He's very good on his social media, and let's face it, he's really good on an oval. Very, very good.
Absolutely.
He's got that sort of Oriole Servia about him, where or an Ed Carpenter, where he'd just come in and get it done.
Yeah, we're big fans of Connor Daly. We feel like the decision at the start of the year was maybe a tad harsh, but when he came in to do the one-offs at Meyershank and RLL, he was pretty good, especially I think Gateway was one that just pressed us a lot. He was ahead of pace of both Lundgaard and Rahal, and he performed pretty well all round that weekend. So
it was a tad harsh considering he bought the sponsors to the team. I don't know quite what happened there, but yeah, I definitely felt for him, because he's been scratching around for so many years, and then he finally landed on a sort of gold mine and this wonderful sponsor, took it to a top team, got his deal, and then ended up on the sidelines. So yeah, that's ruthless.
I think what I mentioned as well in one of the other episodes is his ability to adapt to each car, because obviously they've got a different setup, and for him to kind of be able to go into each team and to kind of adapt to that really well, and to still kind of perform and to even sometimes outperform his teammates, I think it's just really good from him.
Yeah, he's definitely rough and ready. You can stick him in anything. You probably don't even need a seat fitting, you know what I mean? You just get in it. Away he goes.
He's a proper IndyCar driver, isn't he? And
yeah,
it doesn't really surprise me. He's gone off to NASCAR at times. He's just that type of guy.
He drives everything.
Yeah,
he's on the quarter miles. He drives anything. He loves it.
He did that rallycross thing a few months ago. So he will literally do anything. So he's a great figure, and he's one who's spoken about the growth of IndyCar quite a lot as well. And it is I think a very, very serious topic, because I think IndyCar needs to establish itself as sort of the premier series behind F1, and I think it's starting to do that. And I think sort of the links we're getting to F1, Herta was very close to a seat, and then Palou and Pato coming in, and McLaren, it's really encouraging.
And the F2 brigade going over, the fact that F1's been a cheese sandwich at times this year. No offense if you like cheese sandwiches. There are more exciting on the shops. And then also, I think the growth of Formula One in America is helping IndyCar. People often ask me this, and I sort of swing it around. I said, it's not a threat for me. I think what you're seeing there is a lot of Americans buying into this sort of single-seater world. When F1's out of town, they've got their own product on the shelf, and that's IndyCar. And I think the fact that Formula One is driving fans to IndyCar is only a positive. I don't see it as a threat at all.
And I think the other issue for years is obviously it's all about NASCAR. NASCAR's the focus, and you kind of had this almost NASCAR blockade where they block out IndyCar. But as we kind of seen in recent years, you had the doubleheader weekend at Indianapolis, and the relationship is starting to build there. You know, NASCAR fans are starting to see IndyCar as well, and it's a huge positive in the series.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, if the thermal club event's a success, it's the first time we've sort of done that since '92 in Nazareth. But, you know, the whole sort of premise behind that was getting some big names involved. And I think if the thermal club is a success, you won't just see the Kyle Larsons dropping in for the 500, for example. You'll start to see sort of some big names, you know, dropping into the thermal club events, and that will be cool. You know, I'd love to see like a Jenson Button or a Shane Van Gisbergen or, you know, more Kyle Larsons or whoever it is, Joey Logano, just dropping in and trying to get it done there as they sort of dash for the cash.
Yeah, I think the thermal club, we've actually touched on it, so it might be worth doing it quickly, is a really positive event. Well, it does feel like Gap. Obviously, it's not quite a championship race, but it's a completely different dynamic. And, you know, nothing's on the line. Go out there, give it a blast and see how you do. And there's already rumours of who might field an extra car there. You've got sort of the dry Ryan Bowles might chuck a car in there. It's looking really positive.
Listen, it's different. It's innovative. I'm all for that. I'm not going to judge it before we've seen it, if you like. And then I genuinely hope it's a success, because it'd be fun to have something slightly different.
Yeah, I think it could be one where the smaller teams really, you know, if there's they might push a bit harder than the powerhouses, because you look at the push to get into the leaders circle. $1 million is a lot of money for a lot of teams, and it can be the difference between running an extra car or not. So I think, yeah, it could make for some good racing, providing the track allows good racing, because let's be frank, we don't really know that much about it.
Yeah, I genuinely don't. I've watched a few onboards. That's about it.
That's it.
yeah, so it's cool. Before we go, you've got to say a 2024 champion.
Ah, yes. I was gonna bring that up actually. I'll go out there first, and I'll repeat
leading from
what
the
I
front.
said last year.
I love it.
I'll repeat what I said last year. It was, you know, he had a good year. I'll back my man Scott McLaughlin. I'm gonna say Penske are gonna have a massive upturn on road and street courses. He'll finally get an oval win. You know, he got that pole, edged Joseph Newgarden to it. So, yeah, Scott McLaughlin. I'm going to go bold, and I'm going to back him again.
Big call.
Right. Maybe I'll just go with... I feel like I'll go with Alex Palou. It's because he won last year, and I feel like maybe he'll be able to kind of continue the dominance that he kind of had this year. 'Cause I feel like when you have dominance like that, I feel like it doesn't kind of go away within like one season.
No, I think you're right. And there's some big points to be had at the beginning of the year, and he's strong at some of those venues. I think for me, it's all about momentum, isn't it, IndyCar? And if you look at the form guide, you know, you've got your Pato O'Ward, your Scott McLaughlin, your Alex Palou. They're going to be quick at the first few races. And if one of them can get going, I think you're really good. My heart says Alex Palou there, Ellie, but I'm going to go with Pato. I'm torn between Pato and Scotty Mack. I'd love Pato to do it.
I predicted Palou this year, actually, so I might have the magic touch here. So
yeah.
I was going to go Pato, but I'm going to go different now. Let's go for... do I go left field? Let's go really left field. Carl Kirkwood is going to come out of nowhere and have a mighty strong season.
Do you know what?
Wow.
Get it together. Different center of pressure for the aero screen, different setup, different balance. If they can get it together on the ovals. IndyCar's all about momentum. Who knows? He's good. He's good on the opening track.
Even on the ovals, he was comfortably the strongest of the Andretti lot last year. So
he's good at St. Pete. He was really good at St. Pete.
He was. So we'll see how that one fares. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Pato because obviously Archie. Right, you heard it here first.
Archie stole Tom's and Tom stole mine, so now I've got into a massive circle.
I'll see you in September next year to discuss this.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
We'll start off the predictions table for next year and see how many we get right. Because as proved a couple of weeks ago, our mid-season predictions were a horror show. So we'll see how that goes. Anyway, that is all we've got time for. Tom, thanks for joining us. Absolutely brilliant to have a chat with you. Welcome back anytime.
Brilliant. I'd love to join you at any time. Let's hope the winter's not too long and bring on the start of the season next year.
Let's hope it flies by.
Yeah, let's hope 6 months just goes by very quickly.
Fingers
hopefully
crossed.
lots of IndyCar news to keep us entertained. But yeah, that is all we've got time for. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to those of you with Spotify. And we will see you next week. Enjoy.